Welcome to Reflections for Friday. I hope that you can see in the background a creature that my little grandson Levi, who we saw last week, insisted was a cow. They came up for a long weekend to celebrate our other little grandson's first birthday, and we had a fantastic time that sadly doesn't look as if it's going to be able to be repeated for a good while with all these new restrictions that come in today. But last weekend we had a fantastic time, and Levi and I went out one morning early on and we went blackberry picking along this particular part of my usual daily prayer walk, and he was fascinated by this animal behind me. "It's a cow," he said. "No," I said, "it's a horse." He said, "But it looks like a cow." And I know what he means, but it is actually a horse. What we see, what we think we see, isn't always actually true. In our psalm today, Psalm 121, there's a similar common misunderstanding. It's the psalm that says, "I lift up my eyes to the hills. From where does my help come?" Often people think that it says, "I lift up my eyes to the hills from where my help comes." Actually, that second phrase is a question. Yes, I do lift up my eyes to the hills, but where's my help going to come from? That's what it really says. There's a question mark at the end of the sentence. And the psalm goes on, as you will remember, to talk about the various dangers that someone travelling on a journey, either a physical journey from one place to another, or the journey through life, the various dangers that there can be. The first danger that's included is the way in which you could stumble and trip and sprain your ankle. Sorry, Kath, for reminding you that, these things can happen. I know it's happened to me. But the second danger for the traveller on their journey is that they might walk in the heat of the day, in all the difficulties of the terrain, and might actually get sunstroke. I might be overcome by illness and tiredness because of that. The third danger outlined in the psalm is that we might be in danger from the moon. Now, what on earth does that mean? Well, in the ancient world, they believed that a traveller could well be under threat from fatigue and anxiety on a long journey, and that sort of care and worry might mean mental or emotional illness, as we might call it. They called it moonstroke or lunacy. Now, the prefix lunar actually means from the moon. And so, as we walk on our journey, whether we're going from one place to another or whether we're just trudging our way along the path of life, I want us to think where our help comes from. I've been blessed by some of the places that I've been able to journey to in my own life. I can particularly think of one trip that my daughter Naomi and I took to Nepal, and we stayed in a hotel which wasn't a really brilliant hotel, except for the fantastic view that we got when we drew the curtains back in the morning, and in front of us, where there had been mist and darkness, all of a sudden there was the Himalayan vista, and indeed Everest itself in front of us. I lift up my eyes to the hills, and yes, we think hills show us something of the grandeur of the creation, and of course they do, just as trees do in a different way, as Kayla told us yesterday. I remember taking the funeral of my Uncle Fred, who'd been a warden in the Lake District National Park and a member of the mountain rescue team, and he chose this particular psalm for his funeral because he found that mountains expressed something of the otherness and the vastness and the wonder of God in creation. Rightly so. But actually this psalm doesn't say that. For the people of the ancient world, hills were often the places where temples were set up to foreign gods. We went on holiday, Claire and I, to the Gulf of Corinth a few years ago. Fantastic holiday, and we had a view out of our hotel window of the ancient Acropolis of Corinth, a mountain that overshadowed the ruins of ancient Corinth. On the top are the ruins of the temple to Aphrodite, the goddess of love, and all kinds of goings on went on up there in the hills. So the hills don't just speak to the people who would have sung these psalms about the grandeur of God, even though it was a psalm of ascent for pilgrims who were on their way towards Jerusalem, the holy city. They also knew that they were places where all kinds of stuff that wasn't helpful or healthy took place. Where does our help come from in these days of difficulty, when we can easily stumble, where we can easily find ourselves full of fatigue or anxiety or worry, or disturbed by the things around us, particularly when it seems that life is tightening up, restrictions are crowding us in? Does our help come from the hills? No, it doesn't. The psalm continues, where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord who created heaven and earth, including mountains and hills. Yes, we don't find help from the hills themselves, but the one who made the hills. 8 times in Psalm 121 it speaks of a God who guards us, who keeps us, who is attentive to us. 8 times it assures us of God's continuing love. Maybe on our pilgrimage through life, like those pilgrims long ago who climbed the holy hills towards Jerusalem nestling in the hills, maybe we should think again of where our security lies, who watches over us, and how we are eternally safe. God bless.